Hello and very warm welcome at Amish Cycle 5858. I am Amish Cycle. Foreign news have been reported by American, European, Asian, African, Australian news channels and the news agencies. So please let's go to the headlines.
Tonight from Tel Aviv, the world watching, we are just hours away now. The remaining hostages held by Hamas set to be released, and what we've learned tonight, while back in the U.S., the dangerous nor'easter now slamming the Northeast. States of emergency in both New York and New Jersey. The powerful nor'easter gaining strength as it pushes up the East Coast. Heavy rain, flooding, and damaging winds gusting up to 60 miles per hour from the Carolinas to New York to Boston. Lee Goldberg standing by with the forecast, timing out the storm into tonight and tomorrow. Also tonight, near the eyes of the world now in the Middle East, these tense final hours. Cautious optimism here on the ground. 20 hostages who are still alive expected to be released by Hamas within hours here. President Trump and what he said just moments ago before heading to the region. And I'll take you to Hostage Square here in Tel Aviv. The Americans we met who said they had to be here to welcome the hostages home. Back in the U.S. tonight, a horrific weekend of deadly gun violence in multiple locations. Gunfire erupting at a crowded bar. In another horrific case, deadly gunfire outside a high school homecoming football game. Tonight, here's a harrowing new video showing a helicopter spin out of control, crashing onto a pedestrian bridge. Multiple people hurt, including many on the ground. Day 12 tonight of the government shutdown. The threat of mass firings now a reality. And now President Trump ordering Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to use all available funds to pay more than $1 billion military service soon go without pay. And tonight here, the tributes to Oscar-winning actress Diane Keaton. So many of her unforgettable roles, from Annie Hall to The Godfather to Something's Gotta Give. Tonight, Diane Keaton, in her own words, the advice she said she would pass on to her children, and in her memoir, what movie she revealed as her favorite. From ABC News, this is ABC World News Tonight with David Carr, reporting to... Yeah, we're joined now by foreign correspondent Trey Yingst. He's live in Tel Aviv, and of course he has the latest. Trey?
Yeah, hey guys, good afternoon. It was a joyous celebration here in Hostages Square overnight as hundreds of thousands of Israelis were in the center part of Tel Aviv. They were cheering and celebrating, hoping it will be their final hostage rally. The families of the remaining hostages still in Hamas captivity were joined by President Trump's Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff, his son-in-law Jared Kushner, and his daughter Ivanka Trump. You could see how many people were in the crowd. We're talking about hundreds of thousands, and we spoke with President Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff just after. Take a listen.
It's the moment of my life. A blessing in my life. And I couldn't be more thrilled to work for the greatest president out there, Donald J. Trump. He brought him home.
हेलो क्या आप मेरे गाने गाएंगी?
ठीक है, लेकिन मैं बिल्कुल भी अच्छा नहीं गाती।
कोई बात नहीं, इस टाइम में कर संभाल लेगी।
मेरी
Anticipation is high in these final hours. The hostages are expected to be picked up by the Red Cross inside Gaza and then transferred to Israeli forces. Then they'll be reunited with family members and flown by helicopter to local hospitals for medical treatment. The brother-in-law of one hostage, Omri Miran, is anxiously awaiting his return.
I want to give Omri in those first moments is the ability to choose what he wants to do, what he wants to say, how he wants to act. For 2 years, he was deprived of the freedom to act on his own volition, of the freedom to choose what he wants. So I'm going to give that to him. If he wants to embrace me, I will embrace him back. If he wants to laugh, I will laugh. If he wants to cry, we will cry together.
The hostages are set to be exchanged for nearly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners. 142 of them will be deported abroad, 100 released into the West Bank, 5 to East Jerusalem, and 3 to Gaza. Inside the Gaza Strip, Palestinians continue to return to their homes in areas formerly controlled by the IDF. New images show the scale of destruction within the enclave.
We fled our home under artillery fire, leaving everything behind. The house was destroyed, with all our belongings inside. We have nothing left. No clothes, no bedding, not even money to go anywhere. Here I am, pushing the cart with my own hands, just trying to move forward.
Tomorrow, President Trump will arrive here in Israel. He's expected to address the Israeli Knesset before traveling to Egypt to finalize his peace plan. Guys, back to you.
Trey, thanks for the report. You're there on the ground. You're among people. What is the sentiment there among everyone? I know they're incredibly excited to get the hostages back. Is anyone taking objection to some of the prisoners that Israel's having to release? Is there any sentiment, positive or negative, right there on the ground?
Look, President Trump has made history with this deal. It's very rare in the Middle East that you have both Israelis and Palestinians celebrating the same thing. But we've talked with Israeli civilians and Palestinian civilians, and they are thrilled that President Trump has been able to get this deal across the line. He had his special envoy, Steve Witkoff, and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, fly to Egypt last Wednesday, and we're told that the president was on the phone with interlocutors making sure that this agreement got done. Now, there are some challenging parts. The Israelis will have to release thousands, around 2,000 Palestinian prisoners, but they are getting the hostages back, and that has been the primary goal for the Israeli military since the beginning of this conflict.
Trey, you partially addressed this, but I want to dig a little deeper in terms of the Palestinian sentiment here. You said that they were also hailing this as a great victory and giving some credit to President Trump, but what's your sense of the buy-in of the Palestinian people in terms?
Tonight, we are live in Israel on the verge of history. The release of the remaining hostages set to come at any moment, which could start to end the war in Gaza. Hamas fired to release 20 living Israelis by tomorrow morning. Hundreds of thousands packing into Hostage Square this weekend in anticipation. New details on the high-stakes exchange, medical teams preparing for the handover, and what this family member told me he will tell his relative once they're reunited. Plus, the aid trucks rolling into Gaza today as part of the peace deal. President Trump on his way here right now, planning to meet those hostage families in person. What we've learned about the president's address to Israel's parliament and the historic peace summit in Egypt, now just hours away. Also breaking tonight, the powerful nor'easter lashing the East Coast with dangerous winds, heavy rain, and up to 3 feet of flooding in parts. Thousands of flights already canceled or delayed. The mass shooting at a bar in South Carolina, 4 people dead, at least 20 injured. Spinning out of control, the crash caught on camera, a helicopter slamming onto a busy beach. The Good Samaritans who pulled a person out of the wreckage. Going under, the tourist ship built to look like one of Christopher Columbus's fleet sinking. And from here in Israel, the family's waiting and hoping for reunions with hostages just like these. Nightly News starts right now.
This is NBC Nightly News. Reporting tonight from Israel.
This is DW.
Hello and a very good morning to you. This is Sky News at 5 a.m. is your latest headlines. After 2 years of torment, the end is in sight. Crowds gather in Israel's capital as the country awaits the return of the final hostages from Hamas.
Everybody's cheering at one time. That's never happened before. Usually if you have one cheering, the other isn't.
Donald Trump is on his way to Israel, sure of a hero's welcome. But the ceasefire and release of the hostages are just the beginning. In Gaza, the desperation clear to see, with aid starting to trickle in as families return and contemplate their future. As the Prime Minister arrives for the peace summit in Egypt, as one of his cabinet is branded delusional for saying the UK played a key role in the agreement. Also ahead this morning, a senior minister says the Prime Minister's national security advisor was not involved in the collapse of the case against 2 men accused of spying for China. A 13-year fight for justice in Kenya. The family of Agnes Wanjiru heads to the UK seeking the extradition of the soldier accused of the murder. And farmers, local reports the Treasury could be reconsidering its plans for inheritance tax. Hello and a very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us here on Sky News. Israel says it expects the hostages who've spent more than 2 years in captivity in Gaza to be freed in the coming hours of the morning. It's a day that many Israelis feared would never come, and it's the US President Donald Trump who is being given all the credit for making it happen. But on the ground, Palestinians are only just beginning to return to what they used to call home, with an almost insurmountable task of rebuilding Gaza still ahead. Our international correspondent Alex Rossi reports.
It is with apprehension and dread that Mohammed begins the long journey home. His family's life piled onto a small cart,
He doesn't know what awaits him, only the destruction in his neighborhood is almost total. As he draws closer, the road becomes harder to follow. Rubble strewn across the path, the air thick with dust. Every step takes him deeper into heartbreak.
The road is closed. We managed to come through on foot. Here is the house, completely destroyed, as you can see.
Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians in Gaza are making this painful journey home. The euphoria the war had ended has given way to the sobering reality, the sheer scale of what's been lost. As the flow of humanitarian aid begins to increase, the level of need is painfully clear. Every truck making its way through this shattered landscape is surrounded by desperate crowds. How Gaza will be rebuilt is a question no one can answer, but the focus now is on the ceasefire and the release of hostages. And in Tel Aviv, in Hostages Square, after more than 2 years, they are hoping the captives will be home very soon.
We are with their families, we are with the families of the hostages at large, and with the families of the hostages whose lives have been taken away by these savages, by these terrorists.
The October the 7th attacks left deep scars across Israel, and what the end to the violence brings home.
Hello and a very warm welcome to you. You're watching Daybreak here on France 24. These are the headlines. The 20 living hostages set to be released from Gaza, followed by the bodies of 28 others. Crowds gathered in Hostages Square in Tel Aviv. Also, some 2,000 Palestinians being held in Israel are to be freed. The US President Donald Trump is set to arrive in the region to meet with hostage families, address the Knesset, and then head to Egypt, where the leaders of some 20 countries are gathering to talk about future peace. Leader of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, will be there, but no Israeli delegation taking part. France names another new government, but one with lots of familiar faces. It's already been criticised by some in Parliament. The new team has until tomorrow to propose a draft budget in order to get it through in time. There's already talk of votes of no confidence. People taken hostage by Hamas over 2 years ago are about to be freed within the next few hours. The bodies of over 20 more to be repatriated shortly after. 1,000 Palestinians held behind by Israel also set to be released. Most of them were captured during the last 2 years, many of them doctors. The timeline for them, however, is not yet known. The truce agreed upon last week has also seen some vital aid allowed back into starving Gaza. 400 trucks vetted by Israel passing the Egyptian border Sunday, more expected today. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump is about to arrive into Israel. He'll be meeting with the families of the hostages. You can see crowds there gathered on Hostages Square. Trump will then go on to address the Israeli Knesset and then head to Egypt, where he'll be presiding over talks for the future of Gaza. The leaders of some 20 nations taking part, they include the President of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, but no one from Israel. But let's cross live now to Tel Aviv to our correspondent, Noga Tarnabulski. Noga, you are at Hostages Square, where hundreds of people are clearly gathered there behind you.
Thousands of people are here right now, actually, even. They've been here for much of the night. Our France 24 team was here until very late, and people had arrived here simply to mill about, simply as a form of waiting in anticipation, hopeful anticipation. The mood has changed as the dawn arose.
News live from Berlin. Israel awaits the release of the remaining living hostages from Gaza. People gather to watch their return in the coming hours, as Prime Minister Netanyahu cautions that the fight against Hamas is not over. Urgently needed aid arrives in Gaza as Palestinians hope to rebuild their lives. US President Donald Trump declares the war is over as he heads to the Middle East to push for lasting peace. And border clashes erupt between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Dozens of soldiers reported killed. Key crossings close as the Taliban government accuses Pakistan of violating its territory. Welcome to the program. Israel says it expects all living hostages held in Gaza to be released in the coming hours after more than 2 years in captivity. It's part of a peace deal with Hamas that will see the release of hundreds of Palestinian prisoners held in Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the hostage release will allow Israel to begin healing from the October 7th attack. But he warned the fight against Hamas is not over.
This is an emotional evening. An evening of tears, an evening of joy, because tomorrow the sons will return to their border. This is a historic event that is tinged with sadness over the release of murderers and joy over the release of our hostages. This is a historic event that some did not believe would happen, but our fighters believed, many in the nation believed, and I believed. There are still very big security challenges ahead of us. Some of our enemies are trying to regroup in order to attack us again. As we say here, we're on it.
US President Donald Trump has told reporters that the war in Gaza is over. Trump made the comments aboard Air Force One as he heads to the Middle East to make a personal push for permanent peace. Trump is due to address Israel's parliament on Monday before heading to Egypt to co-host a major international summit on the future of Gaza. As Israel awaits the release of the hostages from Gaza, Palestinians, meanwhile, are surveying the devastation left by 2 years of fighting. Aid agencies are stepping up deliveries into Gaza after months of severely limited supplies.
Gaza's main commercial centres are once again bustling. With the ceasefire holding, this market in Gaza City is well stocked. Vegetables, canned goods and soft drinks all plentiful. Cigarettes, once impossible to come by, are readily available. Business is booming.
Prices have dropped by 70 to 80%. People have come back from the south and everyone's home. We've got everything here. Now we just need the war to end.
Hopefully prices will drop further. There were things we were really craving for a year. But today, thankfully, all these items are available once again. Elsewhere, it's a much darker picture. Health officials say
tonight on PBS News Weekend. Desperately needed aid begins to flow into Gaza as President Trump heads to Israel in anticipation of the hostage release. Then farmers in Minnesota struggling to stay afloat as China boycotts U.S. soybeans. And a new film about the life and legacy of George Orwell that argues his greatest fears could be coming true.
It suffices to watch the news every day, to hear elected officials trying to convince you that what you're seeing is not what it is. You have to keep, as always say, your common sense. 2 plus 2 is always 4.
Good evening, I'm John Yang. President Trump leaves Washington and the government shutdown behind to highlight a diplomatic deal-making accomplishment in the Middle East, the anticipated release of the Israeli hostages held in Gaza. This afternoon, he left the White House headed to Israel.
This is the first time everybody is amazed and they're thrilled, and it's an honor to be involved, and we're going to have an amazing time, and it's going to be something that's never happened before.
Tomorrow, Mr. Trump is to meet with hostage families and address the Israeli parliament in Jerusalem. Then he'll fly to the Egyptian Red Sea resort city of Sharm el-Sheikh for a summit of Arab leaders who backed the agreement. Inside Gaza, the Israeli military pulled back to a new defensive line as part of the ceasefire. And desperate Palestinians swarmed aid trucks, not even waiting for them to stop before clamoring for supplies. The next steps are unclear, as many details about the future of Gaza have yet to be worked out. Angel Pfeffer is the Israel correspondent for The Economist. He's based in Jerusalem. Angel, the release of the hostages, as expected tomorrow, is going to close a chapter, a 2-year chapter that's been painful on both sides, both in Israel and in Gaza, albeit in different ways. What's the mood in Israel where you are, and is there any way you can tell what Gazans are feeling?
Well, the mood in Israel is both expectant, but also there is concern that something can go wrong at the last moment. And the vigils I went to over the last couple of days were all, hopefully this is the last time we're standing here. And these are people who have no personal relationship or acquaintance with the hostages. It's really so much a representation of Israeli society, which has been gripped by the hostages saga for the last 2 years. I'm not on the ground in Gaza. I was there with it on an embed there a week and a half ago, but it's very clear that the situation there is the beginning of a very long road of reconstruction. The entire neighborhoods, well, at least one Gaza city, have been flattened in this war. So many of those who you've seen in the footage, hundreds of thousands who are streaming back mainly to Gaza City and to parts of Khan Yunis, are not going to discover their home standing, and they'll have to camp out for a long time on the rubble where their homes once stood. And so it's going to be a very long process, which is exacerbated, as we've seen in the last couple of days, by Hamas fighters coming out from various hiding places and trying to reassert themselves. There seems to be a power vacuum in parts of Gaza. There's with the reports of the last few hours of fighting between Hamas and some of the clans who wanted to take control of their areas. So I think that hopefully what will be tomorrow on the agenda in the conference in Egypt, which Donald Trump is going to chair, will be about how to try and maintain control of.
On this Sunday night, the final hours before a long-awaited hostage exchange in the Middle East. The surge of humanitarian aid entering Gaza while Israel counts down to the release of the remaining hostages and thousands of Palestinian prisoners set to be freed in return.
We can go back to living, we can finally breathe.
The U.S. president travels to the region to seal the deal. To drop or not to drop? How tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles are pitting Canada's political leaders against each other. And an underwater mystery in Manitoba. Who left a graveyard of vehicles in the Red River?
Global National reporting tonight.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. In just hours, all remaining hostages held by Hamas in Gaza are expected to be released to Israel. U.S. President Donald Trump, who played a leading role in ceasefire negotiations, left for Tel Aviv late this afternoon.
This is a very special event. There are 500,000 people yesterday and today in Israel, and also the Muslim and Arab countries are all cheering. Everybody's cheering at one time. That's never happened before.
Trump is expected to meet with hostages and their families before heading to Egypt to sign the peace deal. Global News has learned Prime Minister Mark Carney will also attend the signing ceremony. He's leaving for Egypt tonight. And in Gaza, much-needed aid is now pouring in. Our Jeff Semple reports from Tel Aviv.
For the first time in many months, humanitarian aid is now flowing freely into Gaza. Egypt said 400 truckloads were rolling across its border, expected to ramp up to 600 trucks per day, the amount the UN says is needed to feed the hungry, with 50,000 children facing acute malnutrition. Besides aid, we also need safety and security, says Palestinian Khalid Abudin. The aid convoys form part of the first phase of Gaza's new ceasefire deal that will culminate Monday morning in a tense exchange. Buses lined up outside Israeli jails to transport nearly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners and detainees who are set to be released. In return, Hamas has agreed to free its remaining Israeli hostages, 20 of whom are still alive, including American-Israeli Omri Moran. He was taken hostage from his home in front of his wife and 2 young daughters, now aged 4 and 2. His wife shared this image of Moran's daughters packing their bags to meet their dad.
We had to try and frame it in a way that they understand that their daddy might be returning home soon.
New Delhi at 11 o'clock in Jakarta. I'm Ilakia Silveraji, your headlines this hour. President Donald Trump declares the war in Gaza is over as he travels to the Middle East. The U.S. leader expected to visit Israel and then head to Egypt for a peace summit. Crowds gather as the countdown begins to the deadline for Hamas to release all 20 living hostages. Israel is set to free nearly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners in exchange. And Japan faces a second major storm in a week as Typhoon Nakri approaches. Authorities warn of landslides, flooding, and power outages. I'm Rebecca Bunton at the the National Stock Exchange in Mumbai, where Tata Capital has stepped up to the opening bell. We'll bring you the latest on India's largest listing this year and what's behind the renewed IPO frenzy.
CIU. Hope and anticipation in Tel Aviv, with Hamas preparing to release Israeli hostages in the coming hours.
Aid deliveries into Gaza scaled up and hundreds of thousands of Palestinians begin returning to destroyed neighbourhoods.
Donald Trump en route to the Middle East for a summit of world leaders in Egypt.
And here the Cabinet agrees to changes on super tax concessions.
Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Melissa McKay.
And I'm Lorna Dunkley. Hope and anticipation are both high in the Middle East as a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas holds, and preparations are finalised for the imminent release of dozens of hostages.
Large crowds have gathered in Tel Aviv's Hostages Square to welcome home those held captive. Hundreds of Palestinian prisoners held by Israel will also be released under Phase 1 of the peace deal.
Well, 20 hostages are believed to still be alive, and they will make their way home more than 2 years after being abducted by the militant group. The bodies of dozens more hostages will also be handed over.
8 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time is the deadline for the hostage release, but exactly when it happens and what we'll see isn't yet clear. Families of hostages have mixed emotions.
I truly hope that this would allow me and the rest of the family to just go back to life soon enough. You know, we've set our lives aside for 2 years, and finally this will be a moment where we can go back to living, we can finally grieve, we can finally lay down to rest and move on.
On one hand, there's the excitement of what is going to wait for us in 24 hours from now. There's the anticipation for the end of this chapter of war. Hopefully a new chapter of the State of Israel will begin, but also there's a lot of anxiety.
Tonight, a historic day after 2 years of war. Israel says it's ready to immediately receive the last living hostages held by Hamas.
I'm turning to Koppel in Jerusalem, where some government officials are declaring victory and families are waiting on reunions that could come at any moment.
In Gaza, displaced Palestinians return to their devastated communities.
I'm Deborah Hatter in East Jerusalem. The United Nations says almost the entire population of Gaza needs some kind of food aid.
President Trump tonight traveling to the Middle East for the historic moment.
I'm Nancy Cordes in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, where President Trump will sit down with dozens of world leaders tomorrow in a bid to flesh out this fragile new peace agreement.
Also tonight, extreme weather. Water rescues in the swamp southwest. In the east, a dangerous nor'easter takes aim.
Tens of millions in the path of heavy rain and potentially damaging winds. I'm meteorologist Andrew Kozak. I'll have your full national forecast.
A helicopter suddenly spins out of control over a popular beach.
I'm August Garrett at busy Huntington Beach with you reporting on the investigation and what witnesses saw.
The back of this helicopter was kind of like fishtailing around. I'm like, oh shoot, that thing's gonna crash.
This is the CBS Weekend News from New York with Jerika Duncan.
Good evening, everyone.
It's 11 o'clock. I'm Alex Armstrong, and this is Alex Armstrong Tonight, late edition.
This is a very special event. There are 500,000 people yesterday and today in Israel, and also the Muslim and Arab countries are all cheering.
Yes, President Trump says all sides are cheering as he heads to the Middle East for that historic peace summit. And that's as Sir Keir Starmer lands in Egypt, pledging Britain did play a key role and will play a key role in rebuilding Gaza. Plus, China. It's the scandal that isn't going anywhere, is it? Our growing economic reliance on China is potentially risking an economic debt track. How beholden are we to China? Plus, what promises were made over that London super embassy could be pretty damning for our government. Also,
I've questioned myself as to why did I go, what was I doing, and was it the right thing to do?
Is Prince Andrew's time up as a royal family member? We'll be speaking with Daphne Barak, the renowned international journalist who broke this story. She has the latest scoop on Andrew and whether he's in more hot water. There's loads of news to dig into this evening, and joining me to talk about all of it is former Labour Minister Bill Rammell, political commentator Chloe Dobbs, and GB News comedian Paul Cox. But first, let's get your headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
Thank you, Alex. Good evening to you. Just after 11 o'clock, our headlines. Donald Trump is on his way to the Middle East ahead of a series of significant engagements on Monday. The US President is scheduled to arrive in Israel tomorrow morning, where he'll meet families of the hostages. He'll talk with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and address the Israeli Parliament. He will then head to Egypt to chair a Gaza Peace Plan Summit alongside Egypt's presidents and world leaders from around 20 countries. Trump says there's a lot of optimism on all sides.
This is a very special event. There are 500,000 people yesterday and today in Israel, and also the Muslim and Arab countries are all cheering. Everybody's cheering at one time. That's never happened before. Usually if you have one cheering, the other isn't. The other is the opposite. This is the first time everybody is amazed and they're thrilled, and it's an honor to be involved, and we're going to have an amazing time.
Sir Keir Starmer has already arrived in Egypt. The Prime Minister will attend the signing ceremony of Donald Trump's peace plan and will pledge the UK's leadership and £20 million in aid for the reconstruction efforts. Hamas disarmament and the future governance of Gaza are among a number of unresolved obstacles which could derail the agreement. And the US Vice President, though, has said that an historic breakthrough is close. The gathering of world leaders will coincide with the return of all 20 living Israeli hostages held by Hamas and the release of thousands of Palestinian prisoners. Families of the hostages have been gathering in Tel Aviv to celebrate their loved ones' imminent return. Israeli officials say all 20 captives will be released simultaneously to the Red Cross in Gaza early on Monday before being reunited with their families in southern Israel. It's understood Hamas is insisting 7 prominent Palestinian leaders serving long sentences should be freed in the hostage prisoner swap. Meanwhile, dozens of aid trucks have been seen entering Gaza in an effort to alleviate the humanitarian crisis. It's thought more than 24 people, though, have been killed during heavy gunfire between Hamas and armed gangs in Gaza City following the Israeli troop withdrawal. A cabinet minister says Sir Keir Starmer's national security advisor played no role in the collapse of a prosecution against 2 alleged Chinese spies. The case against former parliamentary researcher Chris Cash and the academic Christopher Berry collapsed last month, prompting suggestions that Jonathan Powell had exerted influence to ensure key evidence confirming China was a threat was withheld from the prosecution. But the Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson says Mr Powell was not involved in those discussions and retains the full confidence of the Prime Minister. A girl and boy who were found dead in a home in Stafford have been named by police. Miraj ul-Zahara was 2 and 3-year-old Abdul Momin al-Fateh were found unresponsive with injuries inside the home on Sunday morning. They died at the scene. A 43-year-old woman from the Stafford area who was arrested on suspicion of murder remains in custody. And a man's been charged with stalking Liberal Democrat leader Fred Davey and his family over a period of 4 months. Inigo Rowland allegedly turned up at the Kingston and Surbiton MP's address unannounced and numerous times between June and October this year. The 58-year-old has also been charged with possession of a flick knife. Those are your headlines. Now it's back to Alex.
PM Hong Kong, 9:30 New Delhi and 11 o'clock in Jakarta.
This is Asia Now.
Good afternoon, it's 12 p.m. in Singapore and Hong Kong, 9:30.
Africa News. The news.
À Madagascar, le président de la République a déclaré dimanche qu'une tentative illégale et violente de prise de pouvoir était en cours sur la grande île. La sortie d'Angela Joël arrive au lendemain de l'adhésion de certains soldats au mouvement de protestation qui a débuté le mois dernier. Empêcher les avions de quitter le territoire. Et pour ceux qui ne nous ont pas encore rejoints ici au camp, n'acceptez pas les ordres de vos supérieurs de tirer sur vos amis. Fermez vos portes, n'écoutez plus les ordres de vos supérieurs et attendez nos instructions. Ce qui me fait vraiment plaisir, c'est que le CAPSAT a déclaré qu'il se tenait aux côtés du peuple et de la jeunesse. Et ils ont condamné la violence contre le peuple malgache. Ces soldats de l'unité d'élite CAPSAT avaient soutenu la prise de pouvoir du président Ange Rajouel lors d'un coup d'État en 2009. La présidence condamne les tentatives de déstabilisation du pays et exhorte à s'unir pour défendre l'ordre constitutionnel et la souveraineté nationale. Le président des États-Unis entrevoit d'imposer une taxe supplémentaire de 100% sur les importations chinoises à partir du 1er novembre. Donald Trump a fait cette annonce vendredi en réaction au contrôle à l'exportation imposé par la Chine sur des éléments de terres rares. Décision qui n'annule pas pour autant la prochaine rencontre qu'il prévoit pour bientôt avec le président chinois Xi Jinping. Non, ce n'est pas annulé, mais je ne sais pas si nous l'aurons. Mais je serai là de toute façon, donc je suppose que nous l'aurons. Mais ils ont frappé le monde avec quelque chose qui n'est pas vraiment quelque chose que les gens vont faire. Et c'était choquant. Je peux vous dire qu'Howard, Todd et moi-même, nous avons tous parlé de ce sujet, tout comme Scott. D'où cela venait-il? C'était juste sorti de nulle part, n'est-ce pas? Ils ont inventé tout ce concept d'import-export et personne n'en savait rien. Cette nouvelle augmentation.
Thank you for watching Amish Shakil 5858. I am Amish Shakil. I hope you will visit again. Have a good life. Bye-bye.